Rush hour at Union Terminal was always chaotic, but that afternoon the air felt even heavier than usual. Bodies pressed against bodies, the loudspeakers screeched non-stop, and waves of passengers pushed through one another like water crashing against a shoreline. No one paid attention to the security team in black, quietly clearing a path for the man stepping out of the VIP train car. Richard Hale, the man the entire technology world respected and feared in equal measure, stood in the center of the station. A billionaire, the king of cybersecurity, the owner of Hale Dynamics. Beside him were two assistants whose faces were tight enough to snap. Richard was not here for leisure. He had come to inspect a classified data transport route that even the government depended on. And then, the first sound tore through the crowd. A metallic click as a mechanical lock slammed into place, a sharp scrape of steel being pulled down. 4 men in technology uniforms appeared as if they had been standing there all along, but the pistols in their hands erased any doubt. One of them bellowed, his voice rough. "No one moves. We want Hale. If we do not get him, people will die." Screams erupted, footsteps scattered, a little girl wailed. The chaos spread as fast as gasoline catching fire. Within seconds, Richard Hale was forced onto the floor, the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his temple. Everything froze. Except a single kid. At the far end of the row of benches, a skinny black teenager sat slouched to the side, headphones covering half of his face. He bit into a protein bar, eyes drifting lazily toward the display board above him, as if the armed men had nothing to do with him. One of the gunmen noticed, snapped, and stormed over. He ripped the headphones off and shoved his pistol inches from the boy's forehead. "Did you not hear me? Put the phone down!" The teenager slowly lifted his head. No trembling, no flinch, not even a hint of fear. Only exhaustion, and a strange boredom, as though this was not the first time he had been face to face with danger. The gunman hesitated for half a second, blocked by that unshaken gaze. The crowd did not know, the robbers did not know. But a few people would later remember that moment, the moment someone whispered the question that made the entire station hold its breath. Who in the world is this kid, and why is he this calm? The tension stretched thin enough to snap. The gunman kept the weapon pointed at Jalen's forehead, while Jalen simply sighed, as if the man had interrupted the only moment of peace he had all day. Jalen spoke quietly, his voice steady in a way that felt unnatural. "If you need time, then you have less than 5 minutes. The alarm system activated the moment you broke the lock on the maintenance door." All 4 men stiffened. The man with the gun squinted. "How do you know that?" Jalen tilted his head, eyes drifting up toward the ceiling of the station. "I saw the indicator light on the ceiling camera. It blinked 3 times. That is the default protocol of a Hale Dynamics system." The answer stunned not only the robbers, but also several bystanders hiding behind kiosks. A scrawny kid, completely calm, speaking with authority, and knowing the inner workings of Hale Dynamics down to technical details. No one could make sense of it. But Jalen understood perfectly why he knew. In his mind, memories opened like a door blown wide by the wind. His father, Elias Brooks, had once been the lead security engineer at Hale Dynamics, a quiet man whose eyes always lit up when he talked about the systems he designed to protect ordinary people. He had taught Jalen everything long before the boy had reached his father's shoulder: how to read indicator lights, how to decode signals, how to map blind spots in a room, how to defend himself if someone ever tried to restrain him. Back then, Jalen thought his father just wanted him to be better than the other kids. But then came the late-night meetings, the strange emails, the hushed warnings. If something ever happens, you need to know how to protect yourself. 6 months ago, Elias died in an electrical accident, the company announced quickly, neatly, and cleanly. Too clean for Jalen to believe it. A man so careful he would not touch an outlet without cutting the power first, dying from a wiring fault? And from that day on, their family's insurance was mysteriously canceled. His mother lost her job. Colleagues who once called Elias a genius suddenly acted like they had never known him. And Jalen, the top student everyone admired, grew quiet, withdrawn, focused. He devoured his father's old documents, decoded unfinished devices, traced every thread he could find. He never said it out loud, but Jalen knew Elias did not die in an accident. He was silenced. So he sat there in the middle of a panicked station, staring down the barrel of a gun with only one purpose pulsing in his chest: uncover the truth. And what unsettled the robbers most was something they still could not grasp. This kid was not afraid of them. He was using the very system built by Hale's corporation to calculate exactly how much time they had left. The gunman tightened his grip, ready to yank Jalen up and use him as a human shield. But the moment he grabbed Jalen's collar, the boy slipped to the side with a movement so clean and fast no one saw it clearly. The man's hand closed on empty air, sending him stumbling for a single second. 1 second was all Jalen needed. He kicked the metal release bar on the floor. A heavy metallic slam echoed as the security door dropped instantly, sealing off the hallway and trapping the 2 gunmen standing behind it. The crowd gasped. No one could believe a skinny teenager knew exactly where that mechanism was, let alone how to trigger it perfectly. The trapped gunman screamed. The one in front panicked and raised his weapon, but Jalen had already grabbed a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher near the bench. Without aiming, he twisted the valve hard. A blast of icy white vapor burst out, filling the air with a dense cloud. Inside the fog, Jalen slipped into the exact blind spot his father had shown him. No camera sees this corner. If you ever get cornered, find this spot first. The gunman barely had time to cough before Jalen moved behind him. A sharp elbow lock, a strangled grunt. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious. People watching could not understand. No flashy moves, no wasted motion. Everything was precise, decisive, and executed like a drill practiced hundreds of times. Jalen shouted toward the passengers still stumbling in shock, "Move to Zone B, now! In 60 seconds, they will have no way out." The crowd obeyed him as if he were an authority figure, not a teenager. They rushed toward Stairway B, glancing back at him with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Richard Hale was being escorted away by his assistants, but he still looked back. His gaze locked onto Jalen's face, and for an instant, Richard felt something slam into his memory. Those eyes, those cheekbones, that look. No way. He whispered, his face draining of color. That kid, is he Elias's son? At that moment, the remaining leader of the robbers stared at Jalen. His expression changed entirely. Gone was the earlier confidence. In its place was unease, like Jalen was not some unlucky kid caught in the wrong place, but a variable in their plan they had never accounted for. And clearly, his presence was no coincidence. Not for the robbers, and even less for Richard Hale. The 2 subdued gunmen lay motionless on the floor, but before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a group of people in plain clothes rushed into the restricted security area. They moved so quickly that most of the onlookers mistook them for law enforcement. Only Jalen recognized them instantly from their gear and the way they advanced. They were not the police.
They were Hale Dynamics' covert internal security team. They headed straight toward him and Richard without a moment's delay. One of them spoke in a voice as cold as metal. "Both of you are coming with us. We need statements." But Jalen saw it clearly in their eyes. They did not intend to ask questions. They had a single objective: control and silence. He was taken into an internal security room, a sealed space, with thick walls and no windows. Richard Hale was forced into a chair beside him. The door slammed shut behind them. Only two people remained. No crowds, no guns, only the truth. Richard leaned forward, his voice sharp and impatient. "Why are you here? What do you want from me? Revenge?" Jalen stayed still. His calmness made Richard even more agitated. "I came to get back what belonged to my father." The words froze Richard in place. Jalen opened his backpack and pulled out a glossy black hard drive wrapped tightly in anti-magnetic shielding. "You remember this, do you not?" He asked quietly, but his tone cut like glass. Richard's face drained of color. Jalen continued. "Internal emails covering up malfunctioning devices that killed people. A recording of you ordering the elimination of Elias Brooks. Network diagrams proving your system manipulated national security data." Each sentence hit like a hammer. Richard tried to speak, but his lips trembled and no sound came out. Jalen spoke slowly, emphasizing every beat. "I know why my father was killed. He discovered that Hale Dynamics' system could trigger a catastrophe. You were afraid he would talk, so you ordered the cleanup." Richard snarled, "You are lying. There is no proof of any of this." Jalen placed the drive on the table and nudged it toward him. "The proof is sitting right in front of you." Silence filled the room, thick enough to choke. Jalen continued, his eyes not on Richard, but on the door behind him. "Did you really think I came here alone?" At that moment, the door swung open. 3 large men stepped inside, their heavy footsteps echoing like thunder. They did not wear uniforms, but every scar, every hardened expression, every deliberate movement made one thing clear. These were veterans who had survived missions the public would never hear about. One of them placed an old identification badge on the table. "We worked with Elias," he said, his voice low but steady. "He saved our lives, and he died trying to protect the truth." Richard lowered his head. He knew exactly who these men were, and he knew they had not come to negotiate. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Pressure weighed on Richard like a massive stone pressing into his chest. A skinny, black teenager, someone who seemed small, quiet, and powerless, now sat before the most influential man at Hale Dynamics and pulled the curtain back on everything hidden behind his father's death. No escape. No subordinates left to command. No place to hide from the truth. Richard swallowed hard. Sweat slid down his temple, even though the room felt as cold as a storage bay. He clung to the only weapon he trusted: power. He lunged to his feet and shouted toward the covert team outside the door. "I want the Public Relations Division here immediately. Call my lawyers. Prepare a press release. This kid," he pointed at Jalen, his voice cracking with panic, "he is unstable. He staged this to extort me. Get him out of here and confiscate every device he has." It was the instinct of a man used to controlling the narrative. But this time, no one moved. Jalen stood and flipped a switch beneath the large monitor mounted on the wall, a monitor wired directly into Hale Dynamics' own security system. Within seconds, images appeared. Millions of people were watching the events at Union Terminal in real time, not through news networks, but through a covert broadcast the veterans had been transmitting since the attack began. One of them spoke.
We knew you would silence every witness, so we sent the footage nationwide." Richard staggered. On the screen, viewers could see the gunmen executing a plan crafted by Richard's own senior staff, Jalen risking himself to protect passengers, the documents exposing corruption stored in the hard drive, the recording of Richard ordering that Elias Brooks must not be allowed to go any further. There was no way out, no way to rewrite the story. Outside, chants thundered through the walls. "Justice for Elias Brooks." Even from inside the room, Jalen could hear them, the voices of hundreds of people, furious, grieving, and standing behind him. Police stormed the station. FBI agents followed. They entered the room just as Richard screamed in hopeless rage, "This is impossible! Impossible! You are just a poor black kid. How could you ever fight me?" His words dissolved into the air the moment he was slammed onto the table and handcuffed. No one in the room looked at him with pity. Jalen looked at Richard one last time. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just calm and exhausted, as if he had been carrying months of grief on his shoulders. He spoke softly, only loud enough for Richard to hear. "You misjudged me, just like you misjudged my father." The door opened, and Richard was taken away. Jalen sat down on the metal chair in the corner. For the first time in months, his shoulders dropped, not from burden, but because the burden had finally lifted. There was no joy, no gloating, just a long, quiet exhale. One painful chapter had closed, but ahead, another journey was waiting. 6 months later, the name Jalen Brooks appeared everywhere in the news, not as the brave teenager at Union Terminal, but with a new title that surprised many: Director of the Brooks Foundation, an independent investigative organization exposing corruption in the security and technology sectors, while supporting families victimized by powerful corporations. Jalen was still thin, still a little withdrawn in the way he walked, but in his eyes there was something steadier, not hatred, but a resolve to carry on his father's legacy. Richard Hale now faced a mountain of charges: murder, data manipulation, corruption, orchestration of staged terrorism. Everything he had once used to intimidate others had returned to crush his career. At the memorial for Elias Brooks, thousands of people stood in silence. A breeze swept through the rows of seats as Jalen stepped up to the podium. He did not tremble. He did not look away. He faced the families who had suffered the same injustice his father had. "Justice does not arrive on its own," Jalen said, his voice as firm as steel. "We have to build it, one person at a time." The ceremony ended, but his words continued to spread, from small communities to larger ones, until they became a movement demanding transparency and protection for those without a voice. "If you believe in justice for the unheard," Jalen added, "then follow the next part of our journey.